really do appreciate the time, and I appreciate everyone's time for coming out today. And we're going to go on a little bit of a journey and try to get a better understanding of ransomware and malware. Not from a technical perspective, because I'm not sure if there are too many people in the audience today that really need to understand what happens when ransomware is put on your computer or when there's a malware attack. But the consequences of cyber. Cyber is a growing threat in the world today, and we all understand it now. And I think that's why there's so many that come to the Cyber Thursday that Hollowed and ITO hold for everybody, because there's a growing need to understand the consequences of cyber and what it means for our businesses. What we also know is that there is a growing demand for cyber specialists, people who have an understanding of how it works. And around the world today, what we're noticing is that this shortage is actually creating an environment where cyber and cyber attacks are ever increasing. And it really is incumbent upon us in our companies, in our businesses, in our private lives, to actually take time out to understand what is going on and what we can do to try and prevent our businesses falling foul or falling prey to hackers, who are now investing a great amount of time and effort in being able to exploit and hold us ransom for illicit gains and illicit means. So I think this series of lectures that Ryan has been holding for the broker network is extremely important, because many of you are in the business of engaging with clients who really don't have fundamental knowledge of what needs to be done in order to secure the environment. And what we've got to start doing is translating what's traditionally been technical jargon into business language, so that people can understand that what they're investing in and how they're going about in their investment is actually going to take their businesses into a better position to deal with cyber threats. And we have this common saying in the cyber environment: you're never ever going to be cyber secure, but are you going to be cyber ready? And the more ready you are, the better your chances are of recovering from a cyber attack or preventing one. And both of those things are incredibly important. Running parallel to that, as we start and as we kick off, is cyber insurance. There's a huge risk out there. And if you understand the risks in your business, which will be spoken about quite a lot in next week's session, but if you understand the risks in your business and you understand what you're capable of doing, you can actually transfer those risks to your insurance, put it in your insurance policy and take that forward. And understanding that also is important. There are countless engagements we've had with clients who've gone out and taken cyber insurance, but haven't actually understood their infrastructure or the cover in a sense that is meaningful or bespoke for their business, and sometimes have fallen a little bit foul in not being able to receive the cover that they expected or they thought they would get if they were victim of a ransomware or a malware attack or a malicious attack. And therefore, bridging that gap is also important, and that's a business issue, not a technical one. So what we're going to do today is we're going to look at a Black Swan event. All of this will be in the context of ransomware and malware, which is really the main theme of the discussion today. I want to introduce you to a friend of mine called Alex Cruz. I want to look at some practical examples, and then we want to look at what we can do as individuals and companies to begin a journey of cyber readiness, to improve our cyber posture, and to build what we call cyber resilience. It's that elasticity that we get when we've done a good lot of planning, we've implemented what we can, and we start being able to stretch that elastic band, because we can recover quicker from things that may go wrong. We know what to do when they do go wrong, and we have a lot of plans on how to deal with our business in the event of a cyber incident. So before we start, I've got a little quiz. I know none of you will be able to answer this, but maybe we can just start with a few questions. Think about it yourself and tell me whether or not you would get these questions right. Is it true or false that if you pay ransomware, you'll get your data back? So this is a real classical question that gets asked from board of directors. We've been called into a number of consultancies around this, where people's computers have been hacked or networks have been hacked with ransomware. and 5 or 10 or 50 Bitcoins have been asked for to release the key to allow you to get your data back. Do you or don't you pay it? And if you do pay it, do you get your data back? Well, obviously the answer is false there. 80% of payers don't get their access back to their data. And this is often because the victims of ransomware attacks are often part of a process of phishing, where millions of emails are sent out to clients who click on it. The malware is delivered into the system is closed down, you don't have access to your system anymore. You get into communication with the hacker. The hacker then promises you that he'll give you the key back if you pay the Bitcoin. Most companies at that point don't understand how to buy a Bitcoin, how to transfer a Bitcoin, and how to pay a Bitcoin. We've sat in board with boards of directors sitting there and considering whether or not, if you pay the ransomware, what happens if it's a terrorist organization? What happens if it's a drug cartel? What happens if your coin lands up in their business and you're then proffering or you're promoting a terrorist organization or paying towards it? What are the legal consequences of that? And that becomes a very interesting dynamic and a very interesting conversation to have. We certainly recommend that you don't pay, because in many instances like this 80%, you don't get the key back. And if you do get the key back, then it's quite convenient for you to go on the list of good payers. And the next year for the same hackers to hack your system again in order to get payment as well. So while we say to companies don't pay, it's no use saying to them don't pay and not have a plan on what you have to do next. You have to have a strategy, a roadmap, a resilience roadmap in order to understand what you do next if you're not going to pay a ransomware. On the next question, is it true or false that 67% of all CIOs surveyed, a global survey, this is from Deloitte, believe that they will be a victim of a cyber attack, ransomware or malware predominantly being those elements of the cyber attack in the next 24 months? And the answer is true. That means 2/3 of your CIOs believe that you will be a victim, your company will be a victim, if you haven't already been a victim of a ransomware attack. Are you ready for that? And have you thought about the consequences? And we'll get to that shortly. Thirdly, is it true or false that 15% of all multinational companies with cyber liability coverage have experienced a data breach and submitted an insurance claim in the past 2 years? 15%. The answer is false. It's actually increasing dramatically, and that's up to 30%. So transferring to insurance, being able to have your risk mitigated through an insurance policy that's been carefully thought out by people who know what they're talking about and can advise you in the right direction. Very, very critical way to regain some of the losses, some of the immense losses that are suffered through cyber attacks, specifically in the large companies. And we're going to look at some of those examples in a moment. Number 4, is it true or false that having backups will always ensure that your data is restored? Now, this is an interesting part of a discussion, and it's probably a discussion in and of itself, because if you came to me and asked me what was the greatest way to defend against a cyber attack, I would say your business continuity, your BCP, your business continuity process, and also your disaster recovery. Most companies don't do this well at all. If you are able to do this well, then obviously, besides the inconvenience, you'll be able to build back your company as quick as you can to its full performing capabilities. But the point about this is that ransomware today is a very, very clever set of code that gets inserted into your system and often locks up your backups before it actually closes the network. So backups are normally go down with the system and you don't have access to them. So will you be able to will your backups always be able to be restored? No. But there, if you've got a proper business continuity plan and you've thought about this properly and had often some assistance from outsiders, third parties, independent of your business, you can have a much better and a more robust BCP, which can assist you in this regard, in which case you're able to restore your business, maybe losing a couple of hours or 24 hours or even a week of data, but at least being brought up to speed as quickly as possible. What's interesting, and we had an interesting case in this regard, a public listed company was ransomwared on the 24th of the month. Their salary run was the 25th. They went down. The unintended consequence of that was that they couldn't make their salary run, even though they had a robust BCP and were rebuilding the system. What that meant is they had to report into the JSE that they couldn't make the salary run. This left the company exposed to market forces and obviously suffered an enormous drop in share price over that period of time. So being able to reestablish your business, being able to build up your backups and to get your system online quickly is an absolutely critical thing. But even if you are robust and have sought to set in place those processes, you can still be caught by those unintended consequences, which is really what happens when a ransomware or malware attack happens on your business. And that's really what we're going to discuss right now. But the last question, if you have got answers, and then give yourself a mark out of 5. If you got 100%, a good pat on the back. If you got 1 out of 5, then you're sitting at that bottom tier, and you need to think about these issues a lot longer and harder, and we'd be glad to help you in that regard. Is it true or false that most global cyber risk registers for 21 place cyber risk at number 1? And the answer to that is true. That is a very true statement. Cyber used to be always in the top 5 or top 10, but it's moved to number 1. And it's moved to number 1 because what you have in the world today is a growing number of technical, young, independent individuals can't get jobs in the market, are joining criminal syndicates and trying to profit from what is an easy way to make money. The CEO of Howden Insurance, which is one of the largest insurance brokers around the world, came and spoke at a seminar we held. And in the seminar, he showed a video of the CIA busting an Indonesian hacking syndicate. And what you see is you see the CIA going in with all of that military gear. The guys have got cameras on their helmets and they're running in. And they go up these stairs into a room, trying to describe it, maybe, let's say, 30 meters by 10 meters in size. In the middle, an enormous boardroom table with about 30 people sitting around it. And everywhere else is wall to wall with hardware and technology, the likes of which you wouldn't see in some of the best public listed companies. And this syndicate was a phishing syndicate, a spear phishing syndicate, and it was really wreaking havoc, and the CIA had got onto them. And what they do is the interesting part of the video was that one of the guys grabs what's arguably the least or the lowest rung member of the syndicate, who happened to be a Chinese national who was also an electrical engineer, to give you an idea of his qualification and the knowledge he would have of IT infrastructure. And they start talking to this guy and they say to him, tell me, why are you part of a criminal syndicate? So he couldn't get a job, and he could make quick money easily. They established that this guy, who is at the bottom of a rung of 30 people in a syndicate, was earning $100,000 a month. $100,000 a month. That makes him an incredibly wealthy person in any language and in any country. But that kind of money and that being at the bottom of the rung meant that the guys at the top of the rung were earning millions, if not tens of millions of dollars a month in what is fast becoming the biggest growing industry, more than drugs, in the turnover from illicit gains through cyber attacks and illicit activities. To begin this, I want to show you a little video, which is just going to set the scene. So if everybody can hear me, then if you can hear the video, please let me know, and let's just get a sense of where we are.
All good, thanks, David. Yeah, could hear the video when it was playing initially.
Didn't think it could happen to us. We are a large company, but not in the league of the big banks. And until now, we just didn't think we'd be subject to this type of attack.
We had infrastructure in place. We had intrusion prevention, SIMs, firewalls, antivirus, vulnerability scanning, external security audits, pen tests, across the board coverage.
This was a classic spear phishing attack. The hackers stalked the target's Facebook and LinkedIn accounts. They found out what he was interested in, so they could craft an enticing email. And for all intents and purposes, it looked perfectly legitimate to the reader.
I was in IT for 15 years before I moved into management, so I've always been overly cautious on the web. This one totally fooled me.
His computer then triggered what's called a dropper. It basically drops malware onto a single computer, which spreads like wildfire throughout the entire network. It's like a cell from a skin cancer, which gets into the blood and then will swim off in search of anything that it can attack, which in this case would be other vulnerable machines.
This was an advanced persistent threat style of attack. The aim was to remain undetected for as long as possible and to own as many systems as possible.
Well, it's the equivalent of someone breaking into your house and installing surveillance equipment everywhere and watching you 24/7 for 6 months.
They then took control of every administrator account for almost every critical application. And that's when they stole entire databases relating to both HR and customer records.
General morale in the company was very low. Everybody took this very personally, and so we should.
We immediately reached out to our industry partners and found that the stolen data had already been offered up for sale on the dark web. At that stage, it's very hard to track, which is extremely frustrating for the company and the direct victims.
We lost 30% of our client base overnight. All told, with loss of sales, loss of data, legal, PR, staff redundancies, and additional IT protection, we're talking about a $40 to $45 million loss over just 3 months.
And they've done their best to reassure me that it wasn't my fault. I've done nothing wrong. They're gone because of my actions, because of something I did.
We know these types of attacks are increasing exponentially. They're always going to be one step ahead of the game. They're going after small, medium-sized companies now because the larger companies have security systems that are going to match what they're throwing at them.
He had a strong system in place, but it wasn't enough.
Well, in this industry, there's no room for error. I was given notice 2 months ago.
Only hope that in a few years, we can get back to where we were 6 months ago.
All right, everybody. I mean, I think that you really just choose that video quite carefully because it kind of relates very much to today's topic, but also kind of when you've been around in the business and you've sat at boardroom tables, what you heard over there is the same conversation that's happening, and that's post the event. At the time the event is happening, there's absolutely chaos, and people haven't worked out an organized strategy. It's almost like before COVID, we didn't know how to act. Now, if you go around, you see in the main, everybody understands what social distancing is and what safe masking is and how to really deal with crowds and no crowds. But unless you've thought about these things, which is something that if there's anything you take home from me today, it's that you have to start thinking seriously about this for your business, whether you're a one-man show or whether you're a 100,000-man show. You need to actually start thinking about it. And the reason you have to start thinking about it is because it's a black swan event. Most people live in a society where you think that everything that you have will start working. You wake up in the morning, you switch your car on and you go to the office. Black Swan event is an event that comes that you haven't thought about, that puts enormous pressure on your business, your life, your company, and everything else that you might be connected to, and turns your world upside down. So if we get an understanding quickly of what a black swan event is, we might be able to understand the severity of ransomware, malware, and cyber attacks, and then start thinking about how best to deal with it. So these are negative events that totally are not predicted for, or not predicted by the people inside the business. What we found in the risk assessments that we do is that people fall in love with their companies and their company processes. And therefore, often when they're sitting around the board, they have agreement in the processes, in what's important and what's not. It's often only an independent outsider who doesn't necessarily have to even know the inner workings of your business that can look at it through a different lens and allow you to see your business from a perspective, for example, of a hacker. Because we all believe in the goodness of people, we all are law-abiding citizens, we hopefully never have to meet a criminal. And more importantly, we never want to meet a criminal online, because a criminal online is very impersonal, very far away. And dealing with the technology here, as you saw when I was switching on my PowerPoint today, that when you sometimes you're moving around, you can't even move around on your own screen, let alone understand what's happening inside your system. So it's a kind of thing that we are forced to confront and think about, where we don't really have the knowledge, certainly not the technical knowledge, to stand on our own feet and be able to do that. So what we have to do is we've got to look at how we manage our risk, which is what we know as a business, and what a black swan event actually will mean, because it might throw that risk management out the window if you haven't considered certain things that are really important to your business. So how to deal with a breach. So interesting, we were in Mauritius with a Mauritius commercial bank, and they are arguably light years ahead of the video that we all saw. And we had the executive committee there with them, with us, and as well as the operational committee. And what we did is we held a simulation for the management team to see what would happen if the bank was a victim of a ransomware attack or something more malicious like a malware attack. Just for your understanding quickly, although ransomware and malware are all viruses, ransomware locks up your system, so you can't have access and must therefore pay some kind of remuneration in order to get access. Whereas malware, as you heard from the video, it's a Trojan that's put inside, Trojan's a type of malware in your system, which actually wreaks havoc. It can either send information out to the hacker or actually start causing chaos within the network itself, which the costs can be great. So we're sitting with a very established board of directors and executives, and we role playing what would happen in a ransomware attack. And everybody always kept turning to the IT people and saying, okay, IT, what do you deal? We've got down, we've been ransomed. They're asking us, what do we do? How do we respond to it? And everyone looked at IT. And the main issue here is that ransomware and a cyber attack is not an IT issue, it's a business issue. So having the best CIO and having the best IT team available is not necessarily going to help you in an attack like this, specifically where your business is customer facing and where legislation is driving you to do and take appropriate action within limited amount of time. So having access to your legal team, having access to your insurers is also very important, because some insurers come in during a breach and take over the management of the ransomware or the hack itself, obviously working together with the IT department. But knowing what is your turf and what is their turf in order to make sure that you're covered and you can act appropriately within the cover is an important thing, and you need to think about that as well. What you also have to know, as I mentioned, is if you decide to pay a ransomware, who are you paying? What happens if it does land up in the hands of a terrorist organization or a drug cartel, and you're then fingered for putting money into there? What are the consequences of that? What actually happens with social media? What happens with the brand? You'll see in the examples that we're going to talk about just now that a loss of brand, and when the brand is takes a heavy knock, the losses extend into the hundreds of millions of dollars, and that's often not covered for effectively in insurance. So you need to think about that as well. But the point being is role playing is one way of really looking at how you can best deal with a cyber attack and how your business is going to deal with ransomware or malware in the system. The best example, I think, is that we can give of a black swan event is 9/11. And there are many reasons why it stands out, and maybe I can share a few ideas around this with you. Everyone was used to this New York skyline with these magnificent buildings. At 9:54, the first plane hit the North Tower. If I had to ask all the delegates at this talk together, how many of you would have thought that someone would hijack a plane and fly it into the North Tower? How many of you would have said yes? The answers are probably none of you, or 0.0001%. Certainly of the world's population would have ever thought something like that was possible. It was out of a movie. It wasn't going to happen. But intelligence agencies around the world did believe that there could be an air attack on a tower. In fact, there are books written by some intelligence agencies about an attack, and there had in fact been a bomb blast in the parking lot, a huge bomb blast of one of the towers, which didn't manage to dislodge the tower. So that wouldn't be a black swan event. Well, it might be a black swan event for somebody in an office there. For law enforcement and intelligence agencies, that's not a black swan event. If I told you an hour later another plane's going into the South Tower, within an hour both towers are going to be struck. Of that 0.001%, how many of them would have thought a dual attack within an hour? Very, very few. But again, the CIA thought that there might possibly be a dual attack on the towers in a relative close proximity in time. There are two serious black swan events that really happened that no one had thought of. There was a data center in the South Tower, and there were 5 businesses in the North and South Tower that backed their data up to that data center. When those towers came down, those 5 businesses were effectively obliterated from the memory of the world. There was nothing left. The backup data sources was in the building, and the second building came down. So from those businesses, could they or should they have done anything better? Certainly wouldn't have suggested anything more than what they had done. But the black swan event was that when both towers went down, suddenly you found yourself in a situation where those companies, that was untraceable, any of the information around the businesses, the connectivity to the businesses, or who the businesses were. There was a second black swan event, which was one suffered by the owners of the Twin Towers. To rebuild the Twin Towers cost $5 billion, would cost $5 billion. They never foresaw that both towers would come down, and therefore they only insured one of the towers. They had insurance for the collapse of one tower, not 2. So the insurance, it's an interesting thing to read about. It's quite interesting from an insurance perspective, but the one tower that did collapse, they were covered. But because both towers collapsed, they only were paid out on one of the towers. So there was a black swan event that certainly took the developers and the owners of the building out once the insurance had only covered a certain part of it. Could they have foreseen a dual attack? Would insurance on both buildings have been worthwhile? Well, you know, after both buildings go down, we can say what's best for those buildings and what would have been best for insurance. But certainly thinking about the events and the events that unfolded and how they could unfold would be something that you would have to go through a long exercise to understand what the consequences could be. Okay, this is my favorite guy. I want to introduce you to my favorite friend. And because he's my friend, I think he could be your friend too. But this is Alex Cruz. Some of you might know him. He was born in 1966. He's 2 years younger than me. Nationality is Spanish. He's got a whopping salary, certainly more than me, much more than I'm earning, and 4 children, snap. He lives in London, and he was educated in Michigan. A really regular guy, somebody we can identify with. In 2019, there was a little quote that I came across that was quite interesting because it plays into what I want to show you now. It wouldn't be surprising if the board and especially investors finally had enough with Mr. Cruz and his headless snake management style when nobody takes responsibility for anything. This statement came after a pop-up on the British Airways website, which showed that they had been hacked. Now, what's interesting about the story I'm about to tell you about British Airways is that the airline industry is one of the most regulated industries in the world. You have compliance that is meticulous. You have oversight that is rigorous. You have a need for security that goes beyond most state assets, and people have to really take care of this. So British Airways is a company that at the outset gets a thumbs up for compliance in all levels. Okay. But there was a note on the website, the following: payments through the main website have been affected, mobile apps affected. And this attack that British Airways had suffered, which is very interesting, it took place in August 21 and ended on September 5. You're talking about 2-week attack. And over that period of time, 380,000 customers' details, including full payment, personal banking, and contact information had been stolen. A massive attack, short period of time. British Airways responds to the attack in the following way. GDPR makes it important. They can't hide behind the attack. They have to go public with the information. They say, we will repay any loss of money, any costs associated with changing credit cards or going to the bank and affecting it. We will effectively be a bank account for 380,000 people to restore themselves into a secure position that they would have been prior to the attack. So that is a hell of a statement for British Airways to make, and certainly a reassuring thing for customers of British Airways. But so what had happened in here is they were victim of malware. And I found a little video again, which I think will give you an insight as to what happened. And it's a short little video. I'd like to play this for you now as well. So then we'll get on to discuss the consequences of the British Airways attack. But let's just see what actually happened.
Let's say this is the British Airways server. You have a firewall right here, the British Airways data center. Then you have a user who, using the browser, connects to the British Airways website. British Airways website returns the HTML and JavaScript that will be rendered on that user's browser. So you'll be able to see the text entries, the images, and finally the submit forms, where you're filling out the ticket information, the payment information, and just clicking pay. Once the user hits pay, the final link, final connection goes there to the British Airways website, where they might use a third-party payment processing. In this connection, payment information is going to be there, CVV codes, what have you, and this is where it's approved, and then finally the ticket is issued and returned back to the user. British Airways serves that code to the user so that the browser can render it, but somebody had changed that code. Looks exactly the same to the user, with the minor change that when he actually clicks pay, the payment is sent to an attacker-controlled website where it is siphoned off. As far as the user is concerned, the normal flows happen and the ticket is issued and they don't notice anything. But now all the payment information has been leaked and they have their own database here with all the payment information for BA. And what you see here is that that actual information, that data that was lost from BA, never actually touched any of these servers. This is a separate copy of it. So even if you're running traditional DLP software here, you would not be able to catch it.
Okay, so very, very interesting. Again, a malware attack, a malicious malware on the BA website, not locking up the system and holding BA to ransom, but actually creating a mirror image of all the payment details of an individual and sending it to a third-party database where it can then be used for criminal and nefarious purposes. So again, a big attack with a big consequence. So the results of the breach, where the login credentials, name, address, and payment card information were stolen. And the IEC, the GDPR regulators had a look at this, and they said that BA had insufficient digital security measures on their website, and the incident was a result of their own shortcomings. Now, if you're aware of the GDPR, you'll be aware that companies who can't show that they reasonably acted in the best interests of their customers and their business to protect their customer data can be sued as much as 4% of global turnover. If you had to choose a company, if I had to choose a company prior to this event, I would have said British Airways would be able to show reasonableness beyond doubt And they would be able to show that in their data centers, in their SOCs and their NOCs, and the way they manage their infrastructure, they would certainly be able to pick up most malware, certainly have plans against ransomware and various other virus attacks. But effectively, because of the sophistication of the attacks, they were unable to prevent this. And with all of their infrastructure and all of their teams, they were still fined 2% of their turnover, which was 183 million pounds. That is a huge fine for a company that is well on its way to cyber resilience and certainly has a cyber posture that would be the envy of most public listed companies around the world today. So nevertheless, with all of that, the sophistication and unique ability of hackers to hack businesses with ransomware, with malware, phishing attacks and the like is so great today that we need other strategies to deal with these eventualities. A couple of quick examples of some of these incidences. Everyone knows Target in the United States. In 2017, they lost 30 million records of individuals. They had insurance with Howden Insurance as well. Target were able to get themselves back online, and insurance paid them out 100 million. What they failed to understand was that once there had been a data breach, customers lost confidence in Target's ability to look after their data. And in America, with a competitive retail industry, there was a run from Target's a closing of accounts and moving over to various competitors in the industry. The readings today about the Target incident puts the losses at $250 to $300 million. So again, hopelessly underinsured, but nevertheless not understanding that in an age today where data has become so sacrosanct, the loss of data can create incredible brand destruction in a very short period of time. When I was growing up, we used to line up to give out details to the white pages and the yellow pages. Many of you might remember that. You had to put your details forward for the telephone book, and the telephone book would tell you exactly where you lived, who you were, and what your number was. Today, that's considered illegal. And companies that don't protect your data can not only not expect you to stay there, but will see in droves with user groups running on WhatsApp and different media platforms, droves of people leaving, deserting companies and going to quick opposition, which has now become global opposition. So again, something that one needs to think of very, very carefully in dealing with how you respond to these incidents, how your clients respond to them, and for the clients that are on here, for the companies on here, what you're going to do if these incidents attack or happen to your business. We know John Chalmers, who always said there's only two kinds of companies that have been attacked and companies who don't know they've been attacked yet. And that really, from what we're seeing, is the status quo, and we need to get real and serious about how we're going to respond to it. The National Healthcare Service in the UK is another interesting example. And in the national healthcare system, you all know about the NotPetya virus. It was eventually found to be a nation attack where the Russians had attacked the Ukraine, but the virus spread very quickly through Europe, and 200,000 businesses were affected over a weekend, going down completely. The virus was called NotPetya. Now, what's interesting about the national healthcare system is that it went down over the weekend. And this caused absolute chaos. The emergency wards, the emergency stations couldn't accept new patients because they were down. And there was a turning away of patients, and patients were driving all over the place to try and get access to hospitals. And effectively, the NHS was crippled over that period of time. Obviously, in the UK, Monday morning came and all hell broke loose. Everybody met in the chamber at Westminster, and heads needed to roll. How the hell could the national healthcare system fail so badly? And the NotPetya, for those of you who do know about it, you'll understand that it was a patching that needed to happen on systems, and they hadn't done certain patching. And a little bit more complicated than that, but it was patching is a very important aspect, because that's why you always get updates in software, because when vulnerabilities are discovered, you need to patch them, because those are exploitable by hackers. Anyway, Westminster call in, the first person they call in is the CIO. They want heads to roll. And it's an interesting story, because he arrives at Westminster to this commission that's set up to understand why the NHS failed. And he comes with 2 lever arch files under his arm. And they say to him, they say, tell us, what's the story? How is it possible that there's such a failing in the national healthcare system? I mean, what is the story? And he holds up one file and he says to the Lords and everybody else that was available at the hearing, he says, gentlemen, this is a file, lever arch this thick. It's full of emails that I've sent to the board of directors, my line managers, and everyone in the organization about the threat of cyber attacks and the need to reinforce and upgrade, skill up, and take appropriate actions to create better cyber posture for the national healthcare system. Here are the responses for each of those emails, which talk about budget, waiting for new processes to be installed, all of which are all very genuine. But because they took preference over cyber, we sat with the problem that we had then. He then put the 2 files together and walked out of Westminster, and actually wasn't fired for the job. The story is a great story, because when we say, what do we do, or what can we do? And we often work with the IT team, the financial team, and the operational team, is that the worst thing to do or to think is that this is an IT problem. This IT manager understood that, and it made it a business issue. And you can't fire a whole business, because there's no ways one individual with their knowledge has got any chance against hackers. When we're hacking a business from a white hacking perspective, we have to find one vulnerability in order to get into the system. Well, the IT department have to make sure in a business of 1,000 that everybody's safe all the time and that there are no vulnerabilities. The odds are stacked against those people, and we're going to win every time. So what you need to do is you need to get people like us, hackers, into the system, show you where those vulnerabilities are, work with them to patch, but then build a business continuity plan and a roadmap for remediation, where you can slowly work towards increasing your vigilance, increasing your posture, and making sure that you're not the next victim of what was effectively a patching process that the national healthcare system fell foul of. I've got many other examples of ransomware and malware examples, ASA and Transnet just being an example of them. But I think just with time being short, I'd like to just carry on just a little bit further, if we can just move a bit further as to what can we do. I think that's a really, really important question. We might all be sitting there thinking, well, what can we do in a situation like this? How best can we protect our businesses? And especially if we're honest with ourselves, most of us on this talk today don't know much about cyber. We probably on a scale of 1 to 5, all 5s, in that we're scared of what it can do, but not really knowing what could the next steps be. And I'd like to just maybe make some recommendations of things to think about, whether you're individual or part of a business, that you can do that can certainly help you build up a resilience that will make you less susceptible to what's happening out there, which is really cyber attacks on a daily basis. So the first thing that we have to think about very, very carefully is training our staff. Why do we try to train our staff? Why do we want to train our staff? We want to train our staff because 91% of all cyber attacks that happen today have an element of social engineering attached to them. What that means is that me and my team will far more concentrate on your staff in order to get them to do something on their system that'll allow us access, than to go head-to-head with your IT team that might have employed the latest technology, antivirus systems that exist. So what we land up doing is manipulating people to click onto our emails that we send them, which carry malware packages to your system, which effectively gives us total access to your business. You need to train your staff. It's an absolute imperative into being cyber sentinels. And there are many ways that you can do that. You can do it through online platforms like Terra Nova. There are many other ones that you can do as well. But training your staff means that that first perimeter, security in depth, is taken care of. Other interesting parts of this is not just training your staff, but training the families of your staff, because the families of your staff often use your staff members' laptops or infrastructure when they go home. So creating an extended band of cyber sentinels will only go a long way to protecting your business and making sure that in this area you're as secure as you can be, or at least your staff are as knowledgeable as they can be, in order to not do and not click on those stupid emails. You might think that you'd never be a victim of a phishing attack. I want to just tell you two quick stories here and we can move on again. Well, you would have seen these Nigerian prince scams. You know, someone's died in Nigeria, $40 million is available. Just fill in your details here and we'll send it to you. Now, for most of you sitting here, you would have switched that off in 1 second. You would have deleted that, known it. But these businesses, you're talking about multi-billion-dollar businesses. Those emails are written in the language they're written in order to make sure that the people on this group don't continue or brushed aside, in order to leave a group of people who are far more gullible and will be more likely go 3 or 4 steps down in the scam to pay or give information that's going to cause them a severe loss. So don't for 1 minute think that those scams will never get you, because if we do a spear phishing attack, which means that we stalk you on LinkedIn and Facebook and social media, we might even sit outside your office, and we've done this many times before. But if we do a spear phishing attack on any one of the people in the group today, I can guarantee you that we will eventually get you to do something that you shouldn't do. You'll give us access to your system. And if you have got more rights than just user rights, maybe you sit with administrative rights, super user rights on your network, we'll have access to your network as well. So the point about it is that training takes place at different levels. There's different types of training that you can do, but cyber staff awareness training is absolutely crucial for all businesses. No matter if you've got 2 staff or you've got 200,000 staff, you need to train them, and you need to make sure that they understand the dangers and take on the responsibility of their role as cyber sentinels in your business. The next very important thing is to understand the risks in your business. Again, there are people who understand this really well in businesses, and there are lots of people who don't take the time or effort to understand cyber risk at all. Cyber risk means building up a risk register in your business around different areas, whether it be cyber, whether it be finance, whether it be in the HR, wherever your business is. But looking at what those risks are and being able to look at your control environment and to build up the right control environment to mitigate or to meet your risk appetite. What that effectively means is that you can never be cyber safe. And some businesses like being more risky than others. I understand those businesses a lot. A lot of entrepreneurial businesses haven't got time to do risk assessments and build up or spend money on putting the right control environment in place. Having said that, if you don't understand what those risks are to your business, then you mustn't cry when you're a victim of a cyber attack. So you need to look at that, and you need to then be bespoke in building up controls to meet the threats that will be specific to your business, and to understand those so that you can build up at least the best response to those, whether they be electronic, whether they be manual, or whether they be through third party. You need to do that, and there are many ways that you can do that, and there are many ways that companies like ours can help you in understanding it. But what this process really gives you, it gives you a remediation roadmap. And without that, your business is always going to be on the bottom end, or more likely to be a victim of cyber attack than companies that have done this. Because this then at least sets a process for people often who don't understand IT infrastructure and the technical issues around it, but gives it to you in a business fashion that you can then at least instruct or be part of a constructive engagement in order to improve. when you understand the threats in your business, you'll also understand which of those threats you need to transfer, whether that be to better technology, whether that transfer is to insurance, or whether the controls that you need to do need to be increased in any area, whether it be firewalls or network access or VPNs or whatever else you're doing in your business. You need to be able to understand that and map it to your business and your appetite. That also goes down to your budget as well. So cyber risk assessment is really important. GDPR, POPI, ISO 27001 all make these things mandatory. So companies are going to have to do these processes anyway. And it's best practice because if you are in a position where you're asked to account for what you did, are you able to show reasonableness? And if you're able to show reasonableness, then your business will stand the test of time because you would have built in the necessary remediation in order to bounce back as quickly as possible from an incident or a cyber attack that might set you back. The last part of this is that we can talk as much as we like about the people in your business. We can talk about the risks in your business. But what we also have to start learning, all of us as business people, is how to protect the external and internal network in our business. A lot of people are interested in protecting the external perimeter of the business, vulnerability assessment and pen testing, but not looking at the internal. Now, if you take phishing and if you take staff as being the prime target now of hackers, if I get access to a staff member's laptop and that staff member's laptop has access to the network and the crown jewels in the business, I'm in the internal network and I'm able to jump around with impunity. So having a penetration test inside your business, being able to understand the vulnerabilities there and to patch them, is a critical thing that a lot of companies don't do. So they've split the external security from the internal. Obviously, those things are important, and you can see part of the process here is social engineering and red and blue team exercises, working with the people in your business, working with the staff in your business, taking the executives in your business through different scenarios, and helping people understand that the business, your greatest asset, arguably your greatest asset, is your network now, and that network is being taken care of by everyone in the business. Well, IT might play the formative role and might play the lead role in dealing with the issues. What you have to now do is create a greater awareness among all business players, as well as people that might be connecting to your network. You might have noticed now that a lot of companies are asking suppliers of them to go through these processes that I'm talking to now, just to make sure that you're doing the same thing to create a safer environment. So if you're getting access to a banking environment or some application which you need in order to run your business, you yourself are secure as the person who's giving you that access. So with that in mind, I think my time's up. I'd like to maybe, if there are some questions, answer some questions. Happy to do that. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned it. The aim here is not to scare people, but to begin a conversation which says that it's okay not to be technically inclined, but it's not okay to be ignorant. And if we can talk to each other in a business way and let technical issues be covered by people who are drawn to those type of things, but through business understanding, through an engagement where we can take complicated concepts and be able to engage and talk to people about it, then we can move our businesses. Into a much safer and better environment, and we can be those cyber sentinels and ready for the fourth industrial revolution like we all want to be. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you very much. Thanks for your time.
David, thank you so much for the insights that were shared. We have run through a lot of the questions in the chat box. I did note, though, that Odette had her hand up. Odette, I don't know if you want to come on and ask a question quickly. I see the hand's gone down. No other outstanding questions that I can see in the chat box. David, I think you've obviously done a really great job getting the message across. So thank you for that. If there are any other questions that do come up, please feel free to make contact with us. We're happy to then pass those through to David and get a response. I'd like to wish everyone a fantastic Thursday further, and thank you for your time this morning.